You guys have probably no idea how nervous I am, so I'm really going to ask for your patience and support right now. They told me to take a deep breath and relax and feel comfortable, so I'm going to tell you a story that happened. There you go. I've done public speaking before, and I've done a lot of camera work, but coming out with this story is it is the greatest challenge of my life right now, so I thank you all for being here with me and getting me through this. I want to tell you a story about a little girl that I once knew, and her name's Carrie, not to be confused with Carrie Roselle, but she had what we referred to in the past as learning disabilities. She had a sister that was born deaf and a young brother who had visual impairment. Her learning disabilities or challenges were never detected in grade school. She had a lot of problems with that. People thought of her as being cute, attractive, and fun, and she had every single way in the world of getting around her problems. Her sister was deaf, and they identified that. They identified her brother's visual impairments. But when she got to school, she had some severe problems following directions. When the teacher told her to go sit down and turn to page 32 and read paragraph 5, she'd get to her desk and feel confused. She had trouble with directions. She'd hide in the closet. She'd cry. One day she got so angry she slugged a wall till her hand bled. And when she went home, she said, "Mommy, look, it's bleeding." And she covered a bandage up with it, and she said, "Well, now I know my left hand from my right." And that helped her get through the flag salute and other activities. But her life was with hidden pain. She got through high school with a lot of help from her friends and knew how to get special support. She decided she wanted to become a speech therapist because she wanted to help people like her sister that were deaf. She went on to college, and let me tell you, it wasn't easy. It was very difficult. She started having stomach problems that were later diagnosed as irritable colon syndrome. And for you people that don't know about irritable colon syndrome, it is extremely painful. Your stomach goes into spasms, and you have no ability to digest your food. She started trips in and out through the hospital and was addicted to drugs, painkillers, and non-prescription drugs because she was in so much pain. At times it was difficult for her to walk. In her spare moments, her friends helped her, and she spent every spare moment in writing classes and reading labs trying to catch up. Now, this little girl had so much determination because she wanted to be an educator. She was obsessed with it. And that's all I can tell you. It was an obsession that carried her through everything. She entered graduate school, and this funny thing happened on the first day of graduate school. She had one friend that really helped her through and really helped rewrite her papers, and she learned every trick in the book to get through classes, drop classes. But on the first day of graduate school, her graduate professor called her in and said, "Carrie, I think you better think about another occupation." And she didn't want to do that. She refused to do that because she wanted to be an educator. And besides that, she couldn't waitress work, which, you know, if you're a woman, you got chances of waitressing or secretarial skills. But when you were probably working at best at this point at a 5th grade level, she had to leave. And she just said, you know, what am I going to do? She had no other choice except to pursue her goals of education, and the next 2 years were pure hell. Her friend that helped her through school was dying of cancer. She was inundated in and out of the hospital with drugs and problems that were so severe, she wondered how she got through that day. But she decided to start getting on focus. She started working out, getting in shape mentally and physically, started seeing a therapist, and tried to get rid of some of that pain that she once felt as a child, and it wasn't easy. She visualized herself running a half marathon, and for those of you that don't know what a half marathon is, I want to tell you it's 13 miles, and Sylvester Stallone and Rocky couldn't hold a contest up to Carrie. She ran, she worked out every day, and she wanted to run her write for her master's exams and wear a running t-shirt and sit there for a week straight and write, and that's what she visualized in her mind's eye, and she achieved it. It was a victory to some, but she never felt any excitement. And she never felt any joy because she never had a true sense of self-worth. You see, people cannot learn to do anything until they feel good about themselves, and she never learned to feel good about herself. After a while, she started teaching. and she really felt the victory the first time she held the children in her arms that struggled with problems like hers. And when they couldn't write and they couldn't read, she'd sit there and hold them and say, "I know what your pain's like because I've been there myself." You know, when she walked out on the playground, she felt like the Pied Pipers of Hamlet. The children would come to follow her, and they would press little notes and say, "I love you." Well, Carrie still was ambitious, and she never felt any sense of success. And she started realizing with her love of competition, she applied those theories of sport into sports and started working with professional athletes. She started working with weekend clinics and had such a thrill of sports and love that her private practice built up from weekend clinics to Olympic teams to the NFL. And then she got into television and started writing articles. People throughout the inner side of the sports and entertainment industry often utilized her as a therapist. It was through one of these interactions that she was introduced to the NFL, and through the NFL to the Foundation with Children with Learning Disabilities. And a year ago, she came to the dinner and just intended to have a good time and help out to the cause because she finally felt like there was an organization that might have understood her problem. And when she got to the dinner, for those of you that were here last year, she got to the dinner, to the tent, and saw the symptoms of what learning disabilities, or I would like to refer to that as we would today, learning challenge meant. And she saw the sign and was shocked. Said, following directions, attention deficit order. She was stunned because she realized for the first time that that was her. And may I add that she did fight the state of California for a teaching credential because at the time they wouldn't let her, they didn't want her to achieve any goals because they realized that she had severe writing problems, and she did fight the state for a credential, and she was aware that there were problems but didn't realize how severe. I've skipped around a lot, and there's a lot of things I wanted to say about this special girl, and I guess some people say she's special, and maybe she realizes it now, maybe not. I don't know, but I am Carrie. And the hardest thing I've ever had to do this last year was practice this speech and get up here and try and tell you how severe my problems were. There were times that I wish that I had never lived because I never felt good, and I just kept crying and never thought I'd get to the end of the light. But last year, when I came to the dinner and felt the kind of support that this organization gives, it's changed my life. And if you ever doubt the kind of work that this organization does, don't for a minute, because it means so much to me. I want to read the words off the back of the program that you have tonight in conclusion. Let no child be demeaned nor have his wonder diminished because of our ignorance or inactivity. Let no child be deprived of discovery because we lack the resources to discover his problem or her problem. Let no child ever doubt himself or his mind because we are unaware of our commitment. And I want to leave you with these words, and you'll never probably ever understand how much your support means, but each and every day there's children that are reached by the foundation just as I was. And maybe I talked too fast and didn't tell you how much, but I want to thank you again right now. I love you all.
A new sports show has reached the airwaves. A twist to this one, though, it deals with the mental approach that athletes should apply in order to reach their goals. Larry Good reports.
The show is called Sports Sense, featuring well-known sports personalities. These athletes explain how to overcome mental barriers and what it takes to be successful.
If you're tight and worried about things, especially things you can't control, you can't, or I can't throw the football as well as I'd like because your muscles are tense.
Sports Sense brainchild Karen Campbell has a master's in speech communication and for 7 years has helped relieve an athlete's mental block, or helped coaches communicate better, or allowed parents to put their child's athletic potential and ability into perspective.
It's kind of common knowledge among the field of sports psychologists that have studied the field that 80 to 90% is mental. And so the more we can concentrate on the 80 to 90% rather than the 10% or so that it's actually skill, the more you're going to increase the skill potential.
For those who care to know how to deal with a duffed shot or a low batting average or a poor free throw percentage, Sports Sense may prove to be a positive turnabout. Larry Good, Key News, Ventura.
This is 2020.
We've all known children who, for some reason, seem troublesome in school and at home and incapable of settling down or focusing on one thing. Now think, because you probably know adults with the same kinds of problems who are now accused of never listening or following through. Well, what you and others may perceive as laziness or indifference could be something else entirely. A brain disorder, once seen as only in children, but now recognized in adults as well. We're bringing you this story again because, as Catherine Pryor reports, there is a treatment, and it can change people's lives dramatically and overnight.
Peter Homans is a businessman, a money manager, a composer, a family man. His attention constantly bounces from one thing to another as he moves through life at a frantic pace. It's a feeling captured in the unusual music he composes.
You'll have the clarinet playing along, and all of a sudden these, marimbas and vibraphones come out of the bottom, and all of a sudden the trumpets come out. It's kind of overflowing, and that's the way I experience life.
But for Peter, this frenetic life of constant movement is not by choice. Instead, it's what he's literally driven to do by something called attention deficit disorder, a biological disorder of the brain that affects millions of American adults.
This disorder was first diagnosed in children over 50 years ago and came to be known as hyperactivity because that was the most obvious symptom. Years later, it was renamed attention deficit disorder, ADD, when experts found there were other symptoms, such as a tendency to be impulsive, or terrible problems concentrating or paying attention. But for years, ADD was only diagnosed in children because no one thought to look for it in adults.
Can I have one, sir?
But it is now known that at least half of the children who have ADD never outgrow it, and its untreated symptoms can plague their adult lives.
I've had the experience where I can be talking to someone like you, and your mouth is moving, and I'm literally not hearing you. Randomly, something on the order of 30 or 40% of the time, I will lose all focus altogether. Can you say Cincinnati? Can you say Cincinnati?
These lapses in attention have frustrated Peter his entire life. In school, he showed very high intelligence, but periodically, without any warning, he couldn't function at all.
I'd read the same thing 35 times. None of it would ever sink in. I couldn't concentrate on anything. My mother thought I was doing drugs, but I wasn't doing drugs. I mean, and the school thought I was doing drugs. But I just completely lost concentration.
Doctor, what sort of things do these children tend to hear?
According to ADD expert Dr. Ned Hallowell, without a proper diagnosis, parents and teachers can become frustrated and even angry with such a child's behavior.
Typically, they're told they're stubborn, they're lazy, they're willful, they're stupid, they're underachievers. As they get older, the teacher comments become very moralistic. Your life is in your hands. If only you would try harder, if only you would buckle down.
I just thought I was, damaged, or not very bright, or something. I mean,
Now, you knew you were bright. You knew that.
But I didn't, because if I was bright, why would I be incapable of doing these things? And what discovering ADD did for me was it said, hey, listen, there is a reason for this, and it's just a chemical thing. It's like a switch that goes on and off.
So she would be here 30 minutes.
Before the discovery of a biological basis for ADD, the disorder was blamed on everything from bad parenting to food additives. Dr. Alan Zemetkin's research at the National Institutes of Health changed all that.
We study the patients using parts of the brain that are important for paying attention.
energy metabolism.
Dr. Zemetkin discovered that the ADD brain is less active than the normal brain, as you can see in these computerized PET scan pictures, where red and white shows more activity in the normal brain, and green and blue shows less activity in the ADD brain. So the ADD brain can't do its job of focusing attention or controlling physical or emotional impulses. Researchers also learned that ADD can be genetic, and now many adults are discovering their own ADD through their children.
Hi. Did you have a nice day?
Yes.
Good.
She started actually verbalizing, I have a hard time paying attention. When I'm reading a book, I can't remember at the end of the page what I've read. When I'm watching a movie, I can't remember at the beginning of the movie at the end what happened in the beginning.
Hannah Oresti was determined to discover the reasons why her daughter had difficulty concentrating. At school, there was no hyperactivity to suggest ADD, so the teachers just assumed Devorah wasn't as bright as the other children.
One of my teachers, she put me in the lowest reading group, and I came home crying, saying, like, she doesn't know how smart I am.
Hannah refused to accept the school's assessment and didn't give up until finding the proper diagnosis, attention deficit disorder.
The first thing I did was I got out a book and read what it was. And the first article I read described her to a T. Yeah. And I read this article and I sat there thinking, this is me.
There are probably 10 to 15 million adults in the United States today who have attention deficit disorder and don't know it.
For people like Hannah, it just becomes a way of life. And if they go for help, most therapists fail to recognize adult ADD and don't know how to diagnose or treat it. There are no definitive psychological tests, and the brain PET scanning is only useful for research. So a diagnosis of adult ADD must be made by getting to know the person and understanding their history.
And so what I look for in the history is the sense of underachievement, trouble with organization and disorganization, often trouble with mood regulation, tendency chronically to procrastinate, this sort of low-level chronic anxiety that the world might fall apart at any moment because they just can't attend to everything all at once.
Isn't everybody like this to some extent?
Just because everyone can identify with it somewhat, that does not mean that everyone has it. In order to have the diagnosis of ADD, you must have these symptoms intensely and for a long time.
Dr. Hallowell evaluated Hannah and found the critical factor in making a correct diagnosis of ADD. Her symptoms had been present since childhood. Finding the right medication and the right dose was the next challenge. When she did, the relief it gave her was striking.
It was actually like, you know, when your TV has snow on it and you need to tune it in. That's in essence what it was like. Having that feeling of fuzziness, but then all of a sudden somebody tuned it in.
Suddenly things are clear. And that is the experience people get when they get treatment for their ADD. They'd been living with this confusion without knowing what it was.
Because ADD often runs in families, Hannah had her son Eli tested when he showed problems with attention. Eli has a wonderful way of explaining just how much his medication helps him.
Like a day ago, I took my medicine too early, and for an hour in school I couldn't pay attention. So it's like being the richest man in the world and then dropping to broke. So
ADD is not all bad news. In fact, with proper diagnosis and treatment, there can be some interesting benefits. For example, people with ADD are often drawn toward creative endeavors and situations that require spontaneity. Eli saw our camera and found a way to make one of his own.
So you can take a picture of that camera right there, can't you?
Oh, there are my drums.
Once Peter Homans was diagnosed and treated for ADD, his passion for composing music returned.
Cool, huh?
There's no correlation between ADD and intelligence. In fact, many people with ADD are very smart, very creative. I think that part of the brain that has to do with regulating impulse control and attention is altered in such a way that more possibilities are entertained. What is creativity but impulsivity gone right?
Just as discovering ADD can open up a life, living with it undiscovered can destroy one.
What did I do
Get in now. Hadley?
For Bill Garnett, his undiagnosed ADD was hurting everyone he loved and turning life at home and at work into a nightmare.
When I would enter the office, I always looked at it as a war zone. It's just too much pressure for me, so I would just immediately run into my office and close the door because nobody could bother me. But I always felt like I had everything up in the air, nothing getting done. I would start a lot of different projects, but never finish one.
In ADD, everything seems to be happening all at once. And that's why prioritizing is so difficult. That's why it's hard to decide what to do first.
I couldn't deal with it.
Sounds like you were overwhelmed.
Overwhelmed. My employees gave me a T-shirt that said, "Leave me alone." By the time I came home at night, I was gone, done. And when if any problem presented itself at home at that point, forget it. I was off the wall.
So what had once been a wonderful courtship had quickly become a troubled marriage. Bill was fine at the beginning when things were simple, but with the complexities of family life, he became scattered.
He didn't seem to be very focused on me anymore. The simple conversations, he wouldn't even hear everything that I said. It's like he was always somewhere else.
What did you think when Mary tried to get your attention or tried to get you to focus on something?
I thought she was telling me what to do. And then I would be off into a zone. Mary's response was, "You don't even care enough about me to have a conversation with me."
He seemed so burdened, and I could never figure out what it was.
And basically, I had the attitude, well, geez, I can't do anything right. We got married to live like this. I said, this is crazy. I said, I'm not happy.
Did you agree, Mary?
Oh, absolutely.
Was there ever a time the two of you thought the marriage couldn't be maintained?
Absolutely. Several times.
But really, these last few months, it just...
Several times.
Mary and Bill were at the breaking point, and neither understood why their marriage was failing.
And if we didn't have the situation with my son, I would have never even started to think about what the reasons could be.
What was the situation with your son?
My son Bradford was tested, and they diagnosed him with an attention deficit disorder.
When the doctor explained Bradford's disruptive behavior, Bill recognized himself, both as a child and an adult. And then came the question that changed Bill's life.
So the doctor turned to Bill and he said, well, have you ever considered that you might have ADD?
After a careful evaluation and diagnosis, Bill began treatment.
The first day of Ritalin was, that was unique. That Friday I was able to go to work. I solved problems in the morning, solved problems in the afternoon. I still had time left over in the day. And it was like everything was measured. There was a sense of order that all of a sudden...
Armin, how are you?
Came to light. And I got home at night and sitting down, and I actually sat with the kids. And they were near me. We were watching TV, and Mary came in, and we were talking, and I was just calm.
It's very emotional. I'm thinking, my goodness, it's like we have been released. We've been freed. We have a totally new lease on life, and we like each other. It's unbelievable. It's our way out.
How is the research going now, Catherine?
Well, we talked to Dr. Hollowell, who, since the piece aired, has co-authored a book called Driven to Distraction. And he said, in fact, they're working on a biological diagnostic test that would use brain scanning to determine whether or not you have ADD. And also they're looking for the genetic link.
Yeah, right. You know, here's a question. Should everyone be pulled away from shifting of attention?
Well, it's interesting. There are people, somewhat like Peter Homans in the piece, that say, wait a minute, we enjoy our lives going 15 different directions at once. So the question is it a problem for you? And if so, maybe you need therapy. But Dr. Hollowell also added, be careful, because the symptoms are a bit vague, misdiagnosis is possible, and also if it becomes too popular, then people could be exploiting it for profit.
Thank you, Catherine.